What killed the Biosyn scientists on Isla Sorna? Why were they even on Isla Sorna in the first place, and what were they trying to achieve? Now, a lot of people thought that Isla Sorna was abandoned in 1993 after the fall of Jurassic Park, but that actually isn't the case. Isla Sorna was abandoned in 1995, as InGen hit financial troubles and Hurricane Carissa was approaching the island, which then forced them to move their operations off of Isla Sorna. During the evacuation though, animal paddocks were left unattended and with no security measures left on, allowed the animals to move fully into the wild, which eventually blossoms into the huge ecosystem we knew on Isla Sorna. But you might be asking yourself, what has this got to do with Biosyn? Well, let me continue. Now, in 1996, the Bowman family stopped on Isla Sorna while on a yacht cruise through the Gulf of the Fernandez. Their daughter was attacked and wounded by a pack of Compygnathus. The family, upon learning that InGen was still in control and leased the island, threatened to sue InGen. Not that they weren't already in enough financial trouble after Jurassic Park. John Hammond was still in direct control of InGen, but this is the point where they removed him from being in control to try and revitalise InGen, and that's where we have 1997's The Lost World Jurassic Park, where Ian Malcolm, Claire Harding and the rest of the team land on Isla Sorna to try and stop now nasty InGen in taking all the dinosaurs. And we all know how that pans out. But this does give us our first look into why Biosyn would be involved. If you look around on Site B or Isla Sorna, you see all the old facilities are still there. The administration building is still there, the embryo lab, the worker village, everything there is still intact, although a little overgrown and a bit battered from the hurricane. InGen, when they evacuated the island, left in a huge hurry and left all their research facilities, even eggs, etc. behind in the labs. But at this stage, Biosyn are not quite aware of that. Now, after the San Diego incident in 1997, that clearly sealed InGen's fate, and they were bought out then in 1998 by Masrani Corporation. Within 100 days of the corporation being bought out, activity resumed on Isla Sorna in direct violation of the Gene Guard Act passed on from the previous year, despite United Nations and other government entities keeping surveillance over the island. Now, it isn't known whether Simon Masrani himself was aware of this crime, but there is reason to believe Henry Wu was involved directly during a 9-month period in 1998 and 1999. The Site B facilities were reused to continue the de-extinction research and development for the second incarnation of Jurassic Park on Isla Nublar. And this is where we see the Spinosaurus being born. And further to that, where Biosyn start to get involved, and things get even more dark and secretive as time goes on. But before all that, InGen's rival Biosyn Genetics infiltrated the illegal research in 1999 through its project Regenesis, succeeding in piggybacking off Doctor Wu's success to bolster Biosyn over the next 2 decades. Well, you might be asking yourself, well, Shadows, what the hell is Project Regenesis? Well, let me explain. Project Regenesis was an illegal espionage program carried out by Biosyn Genetics between 1999 and the year 2000. It involved the infiltration of InGen operations ongoing on Isla Sorna since 1998, and itself was in violation of the Gene Guard Act, which passed in 1997. Biosyn agents posed as InGen staff working with Dr. Henry Wu on genetic reconstruction, piggybacking off their research to further Biosyn's ability to complete their own genetics tech race. InGen concluded its research in 1999 due to fears of discovery, but Biosyn concluded its own research the following year. This is where they also bought out Vis Hoskins and placed him in Masrani Global as head of their security, keeping tabs on everything for Jurassic World's construction. But our story hasn't finished on Isla Sorna. All the scientists of Biosyn still working there. As of 2001, it is seemingly fully abandoned as we see it all in Jurassic Park 3. We see the embryo labs, we see the Spinosaurus, and we also see the quilled raptors. Now, whether or not the quilled raptors were also a product of the research by Biosyn or the research by InGen is something we need to discuss, but we've discussed that in another video here, which I'm not going to go into huge detail for. But what we do know is the fact that they made the Spinosaurus prior to these events in 2001, and Biosyn concluded their research in the year 2000. So does that mean they actually stayed on Isla Sorna for another year, or did they move their research off-site? Needless to say, they were still involved heavily in this research. Pausing working as InGen employees. But again, what does this have to have with them being ripped apart potentially, Shadows? Well, let me continue to explain. Isla Sorna is composed of many buildings, but none of them seem to house any type of paddock where they would keep these large carnivores. We see obviously the embryo lab with the eggs, etc., and some small cages which they could keep smaller carnivores in, but we never actually see any large paddocks to house such as the Spinosaurus or the Ceratosaurus. But that doesn't mean they are not there, especially with them anticipating and giving the Spinosaurus accelerated growth. They would potentially put this in a large paddock. Now, we do see a large fence which looks big enough to house some giant carnivores because we see the Spinosaurus smash through it. So they would have indeed built some type of huge paddock because they have the fences for it. But what we do know, in 2001, the Spinosaurus is near enough fully grown and is absolutely massive, able to smash through any type of fence it wants. And this is where things, I believe, get really interesting. We know Biosyn didn't conclude their research to the year 2000, and InGen concluded theirs in 1999. So if the undercover agents left with InGen in 1999, my belief is that they definitely went back to continue their research, even for at least 12 months, as just themselves as Biosyn operatives. And as they continued their research, the Spinosaurus continued to grow. Now, there is very little information out there in regards to the growth of the Spinosaurus, or the conclusion of Operation Regenesis for that matter with Biosyn, so we can only kind of summarize and guess as to what happens to them. And this is what I believe actually happened. Biosyn did actually go back to Isla Sorna and conclude their research as it does state in the law. They continued for another 12 months on Isla Sorna with the Spinosaurus, but things took a nasty turn. The Spinosaurus and the other animals actually escaped. The Spinosaurus, much like we see in Jurassic Park 3 in 2001, smashes down the fences even though if they are electrified, and in doing so goes on a wild manhunt against the Biosyn employees, tearing, maiming, destroying some of the Biosyn scientists in the process. Now, I do believe some of them obviously escape because they do conclude their research and obviously deliver that back to Biosyn, but there are definitely going to be some casualties out there. Imagine a sub-adult Spinosaurus breaking through from containment and heading into some of the buildings, or even into some of the research posts, because we know there was a worker village which they would have still had in effect and still used. They would have still used the embryo labs. We also know that the Spinosaurus was super aggressive against humans for some unknown reason. Now, there are theories to this, and one of them could be due to the experimentation from Biosyn genetics. Maybe it did escape and the Biosyn genetics team tried to recontain it. We do also see a lot of destruction in the surroundings on Isla Sorna in 2001. Whether or not that would be caused by an animal or by Halocaine coryza in 1995 is very hard to say. I personally think it was done by the Spinosaurus after it escaped, but what do you think? But what is definitely clear is Biosyn stayed or had to conclude their research for another 12 months, and the only way they could have concluded their research is to go back to Sorna, and in the process, that is where the Spinosaurus would have escaped, and in doing so would have potentially injured, maimed, and ripped apart some of the scientist team there. But what do you think actually happened to the Biosyn scientists? Do you believe they just left in 1999 or came back in 1999 to 2000 to continue their research? Because we know they had to continue the research for another 12 months. Hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget to like, check out all my other videos on the channel because there's plenty of stories on there. I'd like to thank my YouTube members. Thanks guys for supporting, and if you want to support, check out the link in the description. I'm Shadows, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers now, bye bye.